Hi, I'm Jennifer Woosley Saylor. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor and the kid of a cop. And this is the podcast When the Call Hits Home.
Hey everyone, it's Ashlee Gethner. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm also a child of a police officer. Welcome back to When the Call Hits Home. My name is Ashlee, and if you guys remember 2 episodes ago now, Jennifer kind of had a special episode with a family member of hers. And so today we thought it would be a good idea to mix in my own family a little bit more to the mix. Crazy enough, we got some incredible feedback about our dad being on this show. He is a secret podcaster that we did not know. And so I thought it'd be a great idea to have both my sisters on here. I am the youngest, so I have two older sisters. We are all 2 years apart. Obviously, I'm 4 years apart than the oldest of us. But it's really special for me to have them on here. I think that what's interesting about being a first responder's child is we all kind of go through it differently, even though we're living in the same home. And I think that's important for us to talk about. So to start this episode, I'm going to have them introduce themselves for you guys. And we'll start with the oldest of us. So I'm going to let Brittany take it away.
Hey everyone, my name is Brittany and I'm 35 years old. I am obviously the daughter of a retired police officer and I currently am a registered nurse. I've been a nurse since 2016. I have 3 kids, 15-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son and a 3-year-old son. And I am currently also in a graduate program for my master's degree. So busy, busy, busy all on my end all the time, but happy to be here today.
Yeah. So what's really cool about that, I'm going to point out really quick, is that Brittany is really working hard to help our first responders as well. So she's getting this degree to kind of join along in my path and help our first responders in need who are struggling with mental health and honestly, really anything. I mean, they could come to you for a lot. Is that correct? Am I wrong on that?
So I'm getting my degree, my master's in psych and mental health nursing. So I'll be, when it's all said and done, I'll be a nurse practitioner for psych and mental health. And so they'll be able to come to me for different kind of therapy sessions as well as medication management, which I think is super important. And from our discussions, that we had before I had gone back to school, you have been having a lot of hard time with getting patients in to see providers for medication management. And there's just a lack of that kind of a resource in healthcare in general. So that'll be a big relief, hopefully, to your practice and your patient population.
I'm going to say, especially to our first responders, because not only is it really hard to get people in, but any first responder listening right now will be the first to be like, the trust isn't always there. And so when I have built that trust and I'm like, hey, this is someone who you can trust too, I think it'll be an awesome collaborative effort to help a lot of them. So thank you for that. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kaity. It's your turn. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kaity. I am a chemistry laboratory stockroom manager at a university. I have 2 kids, a son who's 6 and a daughter who's 3. And I'm just really happy to be here today. I'm excited to do this.
Absolutely. So Katie's job is super hard and I never understand what she's doing. And she sends me and Brittany snaps all day long. And I think it's so cool. And I will never be on her level like that because I dipped out on math and went to social work. So Katie's job is incredible as well. And I'm super excited to have her here. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to ask you guys thus far is obviously my family is incredibly supportive of this podcast. And I'm so thankful for that. And so just listening to the podcast so far, has anything stood out to either of you personally or as a child of a first responder? Again, we share all the same dad, so he is retired now, but we lived it. And so I just wanted to know from your guys' perspective, listening to some of my episodes, how that has impacted you both.
I think that listening to your episodes is just kind of like eye-opening because I know you talked about like the strictness before and having to like follow certain rules that like, I'm not going to lie, I would like go to my friend's house because they didn't have those rules, like strict curfews or anything like that. So I just think with like the strictness and stuff, I get why now he was so strict because he's seen people go down paths and didn't want us to go down those same paths. So I get it now that I'm older, but when you're younger, you're just like, just let me live my life. Let me have a good time.
Yeah, I can obviously we all relate to that as well. And I think that some of the things, you know, obviously you're going through this and you're hearing people come in from all different kinds of first responder families. So it's not only police, but there's fire. And there was a woman on that had, she was a 911 dispatcher. So there's all these different, you know, backgrounds that are coming onto this podcast. So it is eye-opening in the fact that we didn't grow up in that alone, you know, but then also there were some differences noted, like the one that really stood out to me and had me laughing pretty much out loud when I was listening to it was that 911 dispatcher. And I remember her name is Brittany only because it is mine. And she was saying that her father, who was the firefighter, was always very cautious, like, oh, you can't, you got to be careful with this, you can't do this, you're going to get hurt, you got, you know. And it just made me laugh because all three of us has had stitches. None of us needed the stitches, you know what I mean? It was like, hey, it's okay, rub some grass on it, it's fine, to quote famous last words. And then we've all had stitches, so there were some differences that have really stood out, but then also, you know, similarities. Like I had said, that we weren't growing up in something that was not being experienced by other first responder families.
You actually make a good point, and it totally just hit me when you were saying that. And I wonder if there is this drastic difference. I mean, I know police obviously see really horrible things as well, but fire, you know, they do have this, they get called to all of that. And I think they do have this other realm to them of knowing all these like very random things that can happen to hurting somebody, where police, I don't think, do as much. And tell me why in my head, right when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, like trying to kill us, flying us off a tube in a lake, you know, because her dad was like, you have to wear a life vest, which I know we wore life vests, but like they did not show us any mercy if we were on a tube in the middle of a lake. Like they were throwing us off. So yeah, dad was a little bit more like, you know what, live your life and try it and you're good. Just get back up than being like, hey, don't do that.
You just gotta shake it off.
Yeah.
Shake it off.
Yeah. Well, and in that aspect too, I can totally relate with my background in critical care nursing. Like there's not a lot that phases me either, you know. So like
True.
the kids wipe off their bike and I might be delayed to go get up and be like, well, you know, all right, let's take a look. And I'm not flying off the handle or whatever. And obviously I wouldn't, if I thought something needed stitches, we would be going for stitches, but I don't react as, I'm not as jumpy as some other people are either, just from stuff that I've seen and experienced as well. So I totally can relate to dad in that regard.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like one of the things that's really unique about us is that obviously we're all siblings, but we have such different personalities. And so Kaity, when you kind of were like, yeah, I went to my friend's house and did what I wanted to do, then that was so you. That speaks to you. And I think that this next question is why I wanted to do that, because even though we lived in the same house, we had such different experiences. But I also think that comes down to us individually. Like, I don't know, Brittany was, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? Brittany, you were a little bit more passive. You were a little bit more like, you weren't as, neither of us were like Kaity, who just didn't care. sorry, you were wild.
That middle child, man, that middle
You were
child.
wild.
I'm the second born. I just had to uphold the reputation.
You upheld it.
No, I mean, definitely I never liked getting in trouble, you know, like that was not anything that, I'm not saying that I probably didn't do things that I would have gotten in trouble for, and thank God I didn't get caught doing it. But, you know, I never got a detention. If anybody would have said anything to me to, you know, like for correction or something, I probably would have cried on the spot. You know what I mean? And as I've grown up, some of that's gone away, but I'm still, I think at the core, like I'm a people pleaser. I don't like to be, and I know that I tried to avoid that at home with dad, because I mean, Kaity,
she showed us what not to do a lot of the time. So thank you.
Definitely.
Thank
She
you.
definitely, you know, I did not want the repercussions that Kaity had gotten sometimes, being so strong-willed. So yeah, there was definitely times where I was just like, all right, keep your head down and let's go.
Yeah, you paved the way, Caitlin. Although, let's put it out there. So let's see if he actually listens to this episode. This will be a good test to see. But we know Katie's his favorite. So we just have to ride that out. I mean, maybe it's because she gave him such a hard time. I don't know, but we know that's what it is. And so now we'll see. This is a good test. He'll be like, no, you didn't put that out there. We all know. So anyway, so with that said, what was your guys's, and I, of course, digging deep here a little bit, and I know it can be uncomfortable, but what was your guys' experience like growing up with dad as a police officer? And again, you could take me out of it, take everything out of it. It's your own personal experience of what it was like having a father as a first responder, right? Like a dad as a police officer. And whoever wants to start with that, Kaity, you want to go?
Sure. I don't know. I feel like I had a very different experience from even you, because I know from a young age you were like very worried about dad a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really felt that. I feel like the very first time I felt that worry, I was on a ride along, but I was like in high school, like I was older. And I remember him saying, like, you usually can't take family members with you together on a ride along, because if something happens, you might not be able to emotionally control yourself to figure out what to do next.
Right.
And so I remember him telling me, like, we'll be fine though, it's fine. I remember him like just letting that sink in, and him like walking up to give a car a ticket, and I'm sitting in a car and I'm like, oh no, wait, what if something just goes wrong right now? What do I do? And like, I wouldn't be able to watch that. So I don't know. I felt like you were very at a young age aware of that. And I always was just like, oh, this is so cool. He's so just does whatever, he's so strong and brave. And it didn't really hit me until I was older, like, oh gosh, something can go seriously wrong here.
Yeah.
So
sure.
I feel like in that aspect, it was a little different for me, because I just saw it as more like a really cool thing. And it wasn't until later of my life that I worry due to, people were talking really poorly about police officers and all that stuff. And I was like, ooh, maybe he has to get out of this because I don't like any of this. And, even people would bring stuff up and all you want to do is defend.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also don't want to do that because you don't want to draw attention to yourself or your family.
Right.
So you're just kind of like stuck in this middle spot. But so that was kind of my experience. I just thought he was a really, really, really cool dad.
Now Brittany and I have already alluded to the fact that you were the troublemaker. And so you did face the wrath of dad a little bit more than us, although we all did at one point or another. Do you feel like some of that was due to dad's job? Like, do you feel like his kind of, dad was very quick. We couldn't disrespect. We all know this. These are all things he knows too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like very quick to fuse. Like, do you think that was because of dad's job? Do you think that was more parenting? And I think this is beautiful too. You guys are parents, so you can add on to that. Like, do you think that was more parenting, or how do you feel about that aspect of things?
I don't know. Maybe I think it's a little bit of both. I'm sure there was days he did not want to deal with my shenanigans because I did a lot of shenanigans. But I know he was hard on me. He let me know when I did things wrong. I think now looking back at it, he probably was super stressed out because I have a very stressful job where I'm meeting deadlines like every single day. And if those deadlines aren't met, then I'm the only one responsible for that. Yeah. So I kind of get it more now that I'm older and have this kind of high stress job. But also I probably was doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And as a parent myself, I would want to correct my children. Now, would I do it in the same way? Probably not. But I get where he was coming from now.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's fair. And I think that's fair to ask. It's one of those things where on the show, it's hard to always tell, right? Like, I'm always like, well, some of this is regular parenting, but then also I feel like some of this is due to the job. Like if I had a stressful day at the job, I come home and my kids are doing something or, what have you, I tend to lash out a little bit more. And I just always wonder that, like, we've never actually, to the people listening, right? Like, I don't think any of us, you guys, we've never sat down and talked about this because it's just the way life is for us. So we've never had to, but this is the first time, like, the three of us are sitting down and having this like candid conversation about what was it truly like for us. And so Brittany, I'm super excited and interested to hear from your perspective. Like yours was vastly different from mine and Kaity's. And I know that. So what was that experience like for you growing up with dad?
Yeah. So my takeaway or experience, I guess, growing up with dad as our dad is different from your guys's. I always thought of his job as being super cool. He's really, police officers were just glorified in my mind as these really cool people. We would go, to Christmas breakfasts with all the police officers and their kids, and you would be handed a gift and everybody would be happy. And it was like this big family thing. And then you would get VIP seating at the 4th of July fireworks, like you've mentioned. And, like you were just, you felt like you were someone super special. It was, dad was a helper. Police officers help people. And so when you're younger, you see a lot of that. On the flip side of that is also, I remember some really rough times. And I think that a lot of that does stem from the fact, like you guys were touching on previously, to the stress of the job, right? Like, and I can only relate to that now from my experience as a critical care nurse, that the stuff that you see, and even still, he didn't even really start talking to me about like stories of him on the job until I feel like I became a critical care nurse. And there were times that I was working nights and I'd call him in the morning on the way home just so that I could get home because I was tired. I did a short stint on nights, and we'd talk, or I'd tell him about, a patient of mine that had passed and whatever. And so then we'd start going back and forth. And I truly feel like a lot of those hard times, and he probably didn't even scratch the surface on his history, his whole career as a police officer. A first responder is a first responder to a scene of an extremely horrific event of any, that has happened to somebody from any age. So when I talk about my experience as a critical care nurse, I got the bougied up packaged, wrapped up present from that scene. A lot of that stuff still horrific. I still have times where I get like goosebumps of, and just sad from stories that I can remember. They are coming up on a scene of something that is so raw that people can't even wrap their head around. And so to come home from that, working however many hours of stuff, seeing some things, and then coming home to 3 kids and a spouse that doesn't do that either, it's really hard to explain your day or keep that day away from your family, when really, obviously the best way to go about that would be to decompress. But how? You know what I mean? When it's so horrific, you don't want them to know, and they can't even understand what you did during your shift, and they would never be able to. So that's all hard. And so I think that did stem from that. And, what do? How do you decompress? You go out, right? You go out with your buddies who know you, because that bond, and I like to call it that trauma bond, that you build with your work family is something you will never find anywhere else. And so I do think that it did cause some rifts growing up from things that I can remember. But overall, dad was always supportive of me, a little bit different than you guys, right? Like he coached you guys for softball. I cheered. So, there was no like connection really there in that regard for me and him, but we went hunting together. That was something that I loved doing with him. I always looked forward to that. And, still to this day, if I can ever get to the shooting range or whatever, that's always something that we like to do. But yeah, so again, I know I'm taking up a lot of time, but just different points of view from different age groups.
Well, I don't think you're taking up a lot of time. I mean, that's what we want, is to hear your story of it. And I think that you make a good point that I guess I haven't really stopped to recognize, is that you were able to see a lot more of young dad, like young police officer dad, because he had you pretty young. And then, I mean, you were 4 by the time, no, you were 2 by the time Kaity came, 4 by the time I came, but you still had these years, I feel like, of experiencing and learning things before Kaity and I even probably grasped onto what was happening.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really fair to say. And then, our parents are now divorced, and I think that you did kind of have the, I don't know what the correct word would be. I want to say burden. That sounds bad, but kind of, right, the burden of their downfall and seeing them argue and fight and have struggles. And I do think that you kind of got a little bit more of that than Katie and I did. And I don't know if that's just an age thing or again, just because of the stages of life we were in when those things are happening, you
Yeah.
were just more aware.
Right. Yeah. And I know that it's obviously common in these areas, right? And that's part of the reason why that you're doing this amazing podcast, is to bring awareness that this is not atypical, and here are things that you can do to help kind of curb that, right? And so, yeah, I think that it's important to know, that the other kids that grew up in that aspect, that, yeah, they're not alone. We've all kind of went through that too. And like you said, that the different ages it is important with, how it's kind of cool to see how we've each perceived our relationship with our dad and our family as we've all grown up.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like this job, like Dad's job specifically, had an impact on our home life?
I think I definitely realized I had more rules than other kids had.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
can agree to that.
definitely like like way more strict than like I said, like my friend's house. I'd go over there and she'd be like, we're going out," and I would be like, well, don't we have to tell him what time? Like, what time do we have to be back here? And she would be like, we don't have to. We don't. No, we'll just get back when we get back. Like, it's fine. And I was like, no, this can't be right. This isn't. No.
Yeah, for sure.
I just remember like stuff like that. I didn't know other families didn't have those same rules.
Yeah, that, and I think like appearance was always important, right? Like you can't be, you can't go, if we were going somewhere, you were dressed up, you looked done up, your please and thank yous were on point. You weren't talking back, you were polite with everybody, things like that. Those are all, I think, things that stand out, and not bad things, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I try to instill that in my kids, on as far as like please and thank yous and being polite and not talking back to, people that are your senior or your teachers and stuff like that. So those are all like things that I think should be done. But I do think that was something also that was, we didn't act out in public, for sure. That was something that wasn't tolerated. Katie.
Yeah. I feel like poor Katie. I'm gonna have her on here and be like, "Do you want to tell all your stories? Just let it out, Caitlin."
All good. All good.
Maybe hit in the face with a piece of steak and or chicken. That happened.
You just didn't say no.
You didn't say no. You didn't say no. That's for sure. In our family, you did not say no, and then it would come back in some way or form, food or yelling. I don't know. Sorry about that. I don't think I'll ever forget that day, though. That is true. One thing that I've always said that stood out to me, and in fact, so I present on this topic now. I go to a few different departments, and they have me present through the lens of being a child, which is so interesting to me. But one thing that I talked about in one of my presentations, and it's kind of stuck with me, was that notion of like, dude. We weren't allowed to call Dad dude.
Oh, yeah.
You would instantly see those eyebrows turn in, and he would be like, "I'm not your dude," right? And you were like, "Oh God." But I said that in my presentation, and I was like, some of that, again, like some of that is parenting, but I also just so like naturally said that yes, some of that is just parenting. However, like Katie said, I would go to a friend's house and I would listen to them talk to their parents, and so many of them said, "Dude," like that's a common word, right? To their parents. And I remember in my head, like probably body flinches of like, you're about to get smacked, like right in the face. And I said that in my presentation, and she's like, she's almost retired. She's an officer. She's amazing. She literally spit out her drink and was like, "That's exactly right. Like, that's exactly right. That's what it is to be a child of a first responder." Is like, yeah. I'm like, because we would have gotten we would not have made it.
Yeah, like
so
today's word is bro, right?
Oh
like,
I can't fathom. Can you fathom?
Anya's done that to me a couple of times, and I don't know how fast. I probably almost broke my neck. Turn around, be like, "Excuse me," like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, I couldn't even.
My son thinks it's hilarious. He loves the word. I actually don't have a problem with it. Sometimes I'll be like, "That's good. That's enough. You're saying it one too many times."
I think it's in the context, because I'm pretty laid
I'm
back
like,
too,
whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and let's be like really honest here too. He has softened a lot. And so like I feel like the grandkids could say all that to him now and he would be like, oh, that's so funny.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
so great. And then meanwhile, we're like PTSD triggered flashbacks of like, you
That
don't
cracks
say
me up.
that. Yeah.
Because I think about that all the time. Like when the boys are over there and or all three, all the kids, all five of them are over
Yeah.
there and they're running around and they'll do something and I'll look at him real fast to see his face because I'm like, I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the hat to drop. But he knows this too, because he's made, the second his voice goes up, even if he's not trying to do anything, those kids they're crying at the drop, and so then he's like, oh God, I didn't even yell. So I just think his stature and just his voice in general is enough to get them to stop.
Fair.
But
that's fair.
yeah.
And Brittany, like speaking on that topic, if you don't mind, was it different for you? So you had a child when dad was still active. So Anya got to grow up with dad being, still a police officer and working. Was that kind of a cool experience to have her be around that?
Yeah, after.
Oh, well,
after all was said and done. So yeah, so my daughter, I had her at 19, so not ideal. Yes.
But let me can I quickly interject here? Because this is actually a really important topic, and no, but not by any means am I going to make you talk about it on here. That's everyone's right, However, I see this so often working with my police officers when they have a child who has a child young. I have that a lot. I also have a really big, way of working with people who have children who now are coming out as, being gay or being different in that aspect. And so this is a very important thing. Emotional regulation skills for first responders, I think, are not there when it's their own child. Like they could say it to other people, but when it's their own child, it's very, very different. And so I do think that that's an important topic. I don't know that he knew how to handle any of that. And again, not something we have to go in depth with. But yeah, I mean, you had him young. He did come back on the other side of it. And first off, she's wrapped around his damn finger.
Oh,
she
God,
has been wrapped around his finger since the day
for 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, come on now.
I mean, I feel like with how he was at home, right? Like you don't make mistakes. You have your path and you follow your path. And although that path is you get good grades, you go to school, you graduate, you move on, you become a member of society. You know what I mean? Like you do whatever it is that you want to do. And that, pregnant at 19 was not in the cards. And I, as you guys know, told them when I was out of state.
Yeah. First off, let me call you out. I had to go with him to pick you up from the airport so you survived. Like, you're welcome, Brittany. You're welcome.
I thought about not even coming home because that's how scared I was to come home and not deal with any of that. I could not even. It was that was probably the scariest moment of my life. I'll tell you that right now. But here we are, and he loves her and he loves all the kids. And like you said, she could call him at any time of the day and he'd drop everything. Even when she was little, man, he's always been the best at with all the kids, wanting to do everything and teach them everything and, all the things. And so, I mean, it has been a blessing, I think, because, that's how many extra years between the boys and her. So she got 9 extra years just with her and the grandparents. And, yeah, so I don't
She was the only one that got to experience like going to his police department.
And yes, thank you. That's where we were going with that. I was like, where are we going with all this?
He was like, way to bring up my biggest trauma, Ashlee. You have to
no,
derail me.
But I loved it because those Christmas parties that we used to go to as kids, I don't think he was Santa then, but when she was born, he was. And so I have many pictures of Shop with the Cop days where she was there and he dressed up as Santa to give the kids all their gifts. And so I have a picture of him with her sitting on Santa's lap and it's dad. And so those pictures mean more than $1 million to me because, my obsession with Christmas, I love Christmas. And if Santa was actually my dad, I'd just die. So for her to have those pictures would be so fun. So yeah, I think that that's something she's grown up around and been comfortable with the idea of guns and
Mhm,
gun
mhm.
education and gun control. And we've gone to the shooting range multiple times with her growing up. And so
Yeah, she just went last year again too. Yeah.
yeah, so that's something that I find important. So yeah, I do think that she's gotten to be pretty spoiled through his job when he was working and even after.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. I do know that is a big topic for you, but I do think there's some truth and some strength in people recognizing that. And I think when I look at the grand scheme of things, like I think in that moment, there was obviously a lot of emotions from different aspects of just being a parent, but then the
Oh,
emotion
sure.
like of being a first responder. And I hear this all the time from all of my first responders is like, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't
Yeah,
want to be embarrassed, right? But then
right.
they come to realize that like really that's their own stigma that they have to break. Right? Like
Yeah.
that's their own, and once they do, it's not even a big deal. You
Yeah, I
know?
think that that was a huge thing with me telling them was that, you always acted in that public appearance of
Mm-hmm.
your
We were
kids.
held to a higher standard.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was obviously broken in that moment, but not, in the end, not for a reason that was super horrendous, but
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. And Kaity, like you really were a very social butterfly. And you had, I mean, just like me, we had a lot of friends come through our house and stuff. And so Brittany brought up a really good point of like guns. And I do think, put this out there, like I know everyone has their own opinions on this. I do think that I really, really appreciate the way dad raised us with that. He raised us with this respect for guns, how to appropriately handle them, to never be afraid of them, right? Like he did a great job with us girls in terms of that. But I just remember having friends come over. Brittany, I don't know, maybe you did too, but I just remember having friends come over and being like, oh, like being shocked that there's guns in the house. And I would not even recognize it until like one of them would be like, it's like, I think your dad's gun is maybe on top of the microwave, the damn microwave. He left it on the microwave. I don't know. Kaity, did you have any experiences like that? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't feel like anyone actually ever said anything to me. I think like, all of his shotguns were displayed in a locked up display case.
Right.
And don't I don't think any of my friends even like noticed it if he left it on top of there. But we were just so like, you don't touch them, you don't play with them, you don't,
Mm-hmm.
these can hurt people, so like it wasn't even a thing to me. Like it didn't even like think about it at all.
Correct. Yeah.
I must say though, now I don't own a gun. My husband doesn't own a gun. And so I feel like he still does teach my kids actually gun safety when he goes over to their house, which I appreciate because, like it's not readily available to me to be like, oh, that's a gun. I don't think about it. It's not something I think
Right.
about. Like, so I do appreciate that he still like passes down that information about like, if you're hunting, if you're doing anything, you don't point it at anyone. If they are out and about, you leave them be. You do not touch them. Make sure they're always locked up. It's not a toy. And so I do appreciate him for that fact. But yeah, I don't think my friends ever like said anything to me. I think I had some country friends who were like, "Oh, those are nice shotguns."
I was
But
just thinking that. I'm like, okay, why am I even asking this? All of them are like straight up country boys that were probably like, oh yeah, look at those. Like, yeah, for sure. That's true. That's a good point. If you guys could give a tip to other children of first responders, what would that be for them?
that's a
No,
tough
that's
question.
it is a tough question, right? But I think like, I mean, encompassing everything like Kaity, you even said it earlier too, being like I wasn't really worried until the world kind of started to crumble and people started to
Yeah.
really show their opinions, things like that, like looking big picture, even just within the home.
I feel like I would say, I was more when everything was happening like that and I was like worried and, I said I wanted to defend and stuff. I would say like you can go ahead and defend. You can go ahead and say like, diffuse the situation by being like, I don't want to talk about this. My dad is a police officer and I think they're all great people. Like I had a hard time, I feel like speaking up for myself when people would talk badly or something. I kind of just like faded into the shadows. And
Yeah.
I would say like, don't be afraid. You can be proud of like who they are and they can be your heroes and, you know, don't be afraid to say all those good things about them, because they are they're the greatest people, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
What
I
about
think
you?
that I think rounding that out, I think that it's important to understand that they have, they are there to keep people safe. And sometimes, unfortunately, to keep people safe, they have to do the bad stuff, right? They have to write the ticket, they have to make the arrests, they have to go and give bad news. And so I think that it's important to highlight the fact that they are still people that should be praised as good people
Yeah, we should be proud
collectively.
of them. We should be
Yes,
proud of them.
right. And that, as a child of a first responder that is a police officer, whatever you're going through at home, you're not alone with the rules and with the shifts that run into your dance recital or the holidays, where you're having Christmas on the day after or something because they had to work. So just giving them support and being proud of them and being there to just maybe listen and not respond when they need something. That's all good things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great tips as well. And just knowing that my biggest thing and the biggest part about this podcast is knowing that you're not alone, that we all have things, I think we all have a lot of similarities as children of first responders. Obviously some differences if our parent is a firefighter versus a police or EMS and things like that. But you're not alone in this, and it can be overwhelming sometimes, and there's a lot of different factors, but I appreciate you guys sharing all of that. I actually had a really good talk. We have some really cool things coming up for the show, so I'm super excited. I haven't even shared them with you guys yet. But I had a Zoom meeting with this incredible woman the other day, and she was talking about this notion of police like getting first responder children together, specifically police children, and she had said that like she never recognized that police children often had like code words that I don't know if you guys I don't know if I remember the word, to be honest, so like my bad, but code words if like people were to pick us up from school or something that we would know. We did have that. I do remember mom talking to me, dad talking to me about that. I do have that. But one thing when she said that, I'm gonna test you guys. This is a test, so let's see. That when she said that, that really stood out to me was when we would go to bigger places, such as like Six Flags or Disney or family trip, like bigger places. What would he always say? He would say, if you get lost, where do you go? Come on. He would say it every time.
I know. I can't remember if it was like
Security? I don't know. I don't remember him
the
saying
entrance. Was it like the entrance or
It's the
exit?
strollers. Where they sold the strollers and stuff. Like where you rent
yeah.
out.
I don't remember that.
We'll never forget that.
I remember him saying it when we got there, but you know me, I would just like be like, "Yeah, sounds
He would
good."
be like, yeah,
Probably
so
didn't
I'm gonna walk
remember.
away with the stranger. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I remember like she said that and instantly I was like, oh my gosh, like how true. Like I remember him being always like, go to the strollers. We'll meet at the strollers. We'll meet at the and I'd be like, okay, I get it. Like I don't plan on getting lost today, but
I don't
I just
ever
remember them
I don't remember
dressing us
that.
the same,
What's
so
that?
that if one remember they dressed us the same, so if one of us got lost, I would be like wearing the
Yeah,
same exact outfit.
yeah,
I mean, which is brilliant, but
guys,
yeah, I don't remember. I remember mom, and I don't know if it was because she was more nervous about this with school, like giving us the code word of, if somebody says, "Oh, your mom told me to come pick you up," we'd ask for the password. And I believe it was our first dog's name. And so I think, but I just remember her saying that, but I don't remember the strollers.
I
That's
remember
funny.
her saying that more too.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
also
for
remember, do you guys remember like we can never have our number in the phone book? We could never have a
Yes.
number.
Yes. I always felt like super spy because like nobody would
me
ever
too.
find us in the phone book. or
And now
anything
you could
else.
just freaking Google anyway.
I know.
Yeah.
How
You
scary.
just Google. I should not say that I'm like on the pot. There's me, but you can literally just Google. So yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a good one. We didn't like have our name, but the phone book. Oof, you're aging us, Caitlin. Jeez.
I know.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm saying, so I thought that was funny because she was naming off all these things that like even still with doing this podcast, with talking to you guys, talking to other people, there are still things that come up that I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, like nobody else like did anyone else experience this, and it's a really cool thing. So that was funny. Do you guys have any, just as we end here, is there any kind of like funny stories, favorite things you want to share, anything like that?
I can't think of a funny one off the top of my head. I do have like some favorite things is like I love when we got to like dress up as little kids in our dad's stuff. Like we
Wait
would
a
all
minute.
dress up together in like the vest and how heavy that vest felt when you were like 5 years old. Like you remember that, like, oh, you have to
Yeah.
wear this all day.
Yes.
So I do like special moments like that. The fireworks, I remember feeling like I was on top of the world, like literally celebrity status.
Yes.
So those are two of like my favorite things that come to the top of my head.
Yeah. I don't know. I can agree with the fireworks because they got us so close all the time. But I just think in general, like it was always just fun because he'd be like, "Oh, like I'm gonna show him my badge," or, you know what I mean, like to get a good parking
Yeah.
spot, or it was always fun, and then you always felt like you were, like Katie said, like VIP everywhere you went because it was like this secret code that even people that weren't police officers, they'd see it and they'd be like, oh yeah, okay, you're good. Like he always seemed to know people. He always seemed to know
Yeah.
exactly where we needed to go. And I mean, still does. And yeah, just stuff like that whenever we'd go places.
That's such a fair statement. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, like he really did give us some pretty incredible opportunities. I know for me too, like he would just work so much overtime, but he would work that overtime. And if it was something that we could attend, especially at like the Sears Center or things like that, like we would get, he would try his hardest, get us front row or get us,
Yeah.
in there. They really did truly make us feel special. But I also think that speaks to Dad's character, because he knew so many people, but those people loved him.
Yeah.
Like that's why
Wait,
we
I thought of
got.
a funny one. Thought of a funny one.
Yeah.
Do you
Let it
remember when he
go.
was working security for a car dealership and he let us ride around on
Oh,
what was it?
it was
The
a
the
golf
golf cart.
cart.
The golf carts. And I fell off the back and then I had to like get up and pretend like I had nothing happened.
I do remember that. I do remember the golf cart. That was
The
fun.
golf cart, it was super fun, but I think like you were driving or someone else was
Why does
driving.
people let me do, like, I'm the one
And
who
I fell
crashed
off the back.
everything. Why do I drive? I don't understand. But what about when we used to go? I vaguely remember that I was so small. But what about when he was the school resource officer and we used to watch How I Married an Axe Murderer in his office?
Oh, that was the
That was
best.
fun. That was good times.
That and then he would take us to the gym, the gymnastics gym.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go through and go in the foam pit. That was always fun.
Yes.
We're on the sidelines at the
Or when
football
you were
game.
sidelines. Yes, at
Yeah.
the football game.
I
And you
remember him
were
like grabbing kids' masks, being like, my daughters can play better than you. And being like, oh, and I'm like 5. Oh my God.
And I'm
come
like
out of
drinking
there
all the
with all
Gatorade.
this-
I'm drinking all the Gatorade, while we're there.
We'd have a whole new wardrobe by the time we left. We'd have hoodies and beads and tattoos, all the stuff, palms. Yeah.
It was pretty cool having him as police officer, that's for sure. So safe to say that there are so many beautiful positives from this too. And hopefully just like I appreciate you guys coming on today, sharing your story, allowing me to interview you. I know that honestly we scraped the surface today. I think there's so many in-depth things that we're all getting to, but I do appreciate you guys sharing your story, and it's awesome for me to learn as well through your guys' lens of like, how was it different? Like we mentioned earlier, I am a little bit more on the worry side. I don't know why my brain can do that. It can pick out all the things and worry about it, where Katie was a little bit more like, we'll see. And Brittany was a little bit more like, yeah, so I'm just going to behave because I got to behave, so it's very interesting how that works. But I think that one thing's for sure, we're very blessed with the dad that we have and the job that he did. And I don't know, is there anything else that you guys want to say while we wrap this up?
I would like to say I now have a 3-year-old daughter, and she's a little wild like her mom. So I get it a little bit more now. No, I get a little bit more.
To be honest, I was going to mention that. I was going to be like, Katie kind of got it back a little bit.
Yeah, he always laughs. He always says, haha, this is great. I love this for you. And I say, thank you so much. Wouldn't trade her though. Wouldn't trade her for the world, love her little spirit, her free spirit.
Absolutely. What about you, Britt? You got any other closing comments?
In the end, good and the bad, I think all of it, everything that he did, he instilled a lot of good things in all of us. We're all like stubborn to a capital S or T.
Yeah.
You know, you tell us no and we're like, guess what? We're gonna do this. We can't do something, we're gonna do it 10 times better. And so that never settle, keep on going, that I will always be grateful for him for, because, you know, there's been some downsides, you know, to having a kid at 19 years old. But here I am. I'm a nurse and I'm in my master's degree program. And I have 3 kids and you just make it happen. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
yeah, I do appreciate, I wouldn't change it for anything. I appreciate everything that he's given us tangibly and through values, and I'll forever be thankful.
I'm so thankful
I
you
agree.
said that. That work ethic that we have, I think, is pretty unmatched sometimes. It's an honor. Being the baby of the family, I've learned so much from both of you, and I know it comes from them. And it's you know, we really all have kind of persevered to be where we are today, which is a really beautiful thing. But I thank you both for your time. I know Brittany's little ones were definitely trying to hop on a few times, and you know, Katie's maybe they haven't come down yet, but
So good. They're
I
so
thank you
good.
both. I love those kids so much. I hope that people listening to this can feel our connection and see what it's like. There's a lot of things coming for when the call hits home. So please, please, please keep listening. We have some really great things coming. We have some resources coming your guys' way that the listeners, I think, like everybody really needs to hear. So I'm super pumped about that. But the most important thing to always remember is that when the call hits home, Jennifer and I are here for you guys, and we can't wait for you guys to catch the next episode. Thank you.